You're listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
What's up and welcome along to the Straight to Video podcast. How you been? Well, it's been a pretty cool week here at Straight to Video as we had the preview night for the new 80s video shop, which is nearby me in Alfreton, Derbyshire. Myself and my pal Chris Annable have been working on this for a couple of months now, and last Friday we got to open the doors for a couple of hours to show people what we've been working on. To say we were nervous is an understatement. I mean, opening a video shop in 2022 isn't the most solid of ideas, especially when we're not actually renting videos. We just want you to come along and look at them. But for me, that's the magic. We're transporting people back to a time they perhaps hadn't realised they were missing. But to see everyone's reactions was priceless, and we can't wait to do it all over again when we officially open on Saturday the 23rd of July. Really hope some of you can pay us a visit. So for all the up-to-date info, make sure to follow and like at 80s Video Shop on all the social media channels, because there's a lot of cool stuff on its way. Today though, on the show, I welcome one of the guys who without doubt was something of an inspiration when I started this show back in 2020. Mark Woodyatt of the fab podcast Mark and Me is on today's show. We had a lovely hookup to speak all things podcasting, his love of films and music, and he shares some really cool insights which I'm excited for you to hear. We talk about the runaway success of his debut in the podcasting world, the Skip to the End movie podcast, which when launched amassed millions of downloads and led to movie premieres and even its own festival. We chat about him launching his own show during that time and the inspiration and encouragement he got when grabbing the opportunity to interview his hero filmmaker Kevin Smith, who would be his very first guest, and since then Mark's guest list has been nothing short of mind-blowing. I urge you all to go check out markandme.com or follow his show wherever you listen to podcasts. Before we dive in though, as always, please show some love and support for my friends Dead Skull Coffee and their ground and full bean rock and roll coffee. I'm overdue for stocking up myself, so I'll be heading over to deadskullcoffee.co.uk and adding the promo code STV on checkout, which bags you 15% off any order. So go ahead and do the same, as it's the best rock and roll coffee out there. Alright, enough of me. Let's introduce you to a real podcaster as we dive into my straight to video chat with presenter of Mark and Me, the lovely Mark Woodyatt.
Good to meet you on here, dude.
Yeah, you too. How's things? You keeping busy?
Yes, very. Weirdly, 6 years today, I did my first ever interviews with Kevin Smith.
I saw your Kevin Smith post earlier on Facebook. Very cool.
Yeah, and it sounds really odd, but it only feels like I've really started this year. And that might be crazy because I've done 200 and something episodes, but the momentum has really changed over the last 3 months, 4 months. I don't know what has happened. I'm not sure what you like when you listen back to your edits, but I cringe at my own voice. I'm like, I don't think I'm that great. I listen, I'm like, oh, I just want to listen to the guests. So when I have to sit there and hear myself for hours, I'm like, oh, this is hard work. For 5 years, I've had great names, Anthony Hopkins, Kevin Smith, all these are huge, huge names. And I've never enjoyed it. I've never gone like, oh, I did a great interview today. I'm always like, could have done better. You know, I'm my own worst enemy. I sit there and criticize all the time. And I interviewed my dad for episode 200. I just thought, let's not go with the obvious huge names. Let's just pull it home. Really, really personal interview, but fuck it. If people don't listen, it's fine. And something just changed that day. I was like, that's a really nice chat. That's really honest, really open, just really real. And I don't know what changed, but my mindset was like, that's good. And then I started enjoying it more. So I've had a few interviews this last couple of weeks with some bands and I've really enjoyed it.
You took the pressure off yourself a little bit.
I think so. And I stopped looking at numbers. I stopped worrying if one episode does really well and one isn't as good. And it's like, oh, but I expected that to do. And it's like, well, no, let's just enjoy it for what it is. And then, do you know what? It's a different way of thinking.
What was the response to the one with your dad, though? That must have gone down well.
Really, really good. It's probably in my top 10. It's never going to be Anthony Hopkins or, Steve Guttenberg or these rare people. But yeah, the response in actual people replying or sending emails for my dad was the best.
I think I saw it coming up to 200 and I always think, oh, who are they going to get? Or who's Mark going to get for this show when you see a podcast coming up to a landmark episode? And you couldn't have got a more perfect guest.
No, it was lovely. And he enjoyed it. He doesn't know what a podcast is. He just sat there and just had a chat with me at the kitchen and we just had a cup of tea and just chatted. But I've got that forever.
Yeah.
And my dad's 85 and I'm not, I've got to be real. He probably won't be here in 5 or 10 years. and I've got that forever. So even if it didn't do very well and people didn't want to listen to it, personally, I've documented now and got something as a landmark for me. And there are some guests that almost crossed the line as episode 200, and some of them would have blown people's minds. But when it came down to it, I was like, I'm going with my dad. I'm doing what I want to do. Yeah.
Superb, man. Superb. Well, I appreciate you doing this for me. I'm excited to just have a chat about films and podcasts.
What's really funny is the world of podcasting is so busy, and you probably see and you know what it's like. There's thousands upon thousands of podcasts. And truly, I really mean this. On average, I reckon I get 2 or 3 requests a day, because it's just people saying, do you want to come on my podcast? And you go on, you look at their numbers, and they might have 50 people, and they just want you to come on and just basically help them or retweet or do this. And you've probably seen, I've never really been a guest on anyone's podcast. I always just kind of focus on my own. But when yours came through an email, it was not just a DM. It wasn't like, can you help me get bigger numbers and retweet? I don't know. It sounds really cheesy, and I'm not, I've only just started talking to you, but something said to me, do this one, like, just do it. Then you emailed back, and I was like, cool, there's a bit of rapport there. And I was like, actually, it's clicked, it's good. And I was like, what do I need to prepare? Because always it's me doing the interview, isn't it? I do 5 or 10 interviews a week interviewing people. And I was like, it's going to be weird being on the other end of the microphone. So I was like, do I want prep? Do I want to know what the questions are? And then you were like, this is the premise. So I went on and listened to a couple of your episodes. And I was like, this is fucking cool. Like, genuinely, it's relaxed. It's a lot like mine. It's really open and honest and just fun. And I'm really glad that I've said yes and come on, because it's just felt exciting. This is going to be fun.
How great is it, though, when you do interviews, when you stress in, click that accept button on Zoom, and within a few seconds, you're like, oh, this is going to be a good one. This is going to be all right.
Yeah, it's the best feeling in the world. But then the worst one is when you prep, because in the back of the day, I would make sure if I was quoting any numbers or dates for people's albums, I'd get it right. I had 3 pieces of A4 paper for Corey Feldman, one of my favorite actors as a kid. Stand By Me, Goonies, Gremlins, amazing films. And I had 3 pieces of A4 paper prepping all the stuff about getting into the mindset of the character from Mouth in Goonies and Lost Boy. I was like, wow, pushed record, accept, like we talked about today. So Corey, thank you for coming on Mark and Me. So tell me about what made you want to be an actor. And he went, I don't want to be an actor. I never wanted to be an actor. My parents made me be an actor. And I'm like,
curveballs you from the get-go.
I was like, fuck. And he goes, the only thing I want to talk today, Mark, is about my music career. And I was like, fuck.
Right, I'm going to dive in, mate, and see where we go. Feel free to left turn wherever you want.
Keep me in line. The ball's in your court.
Alrighty, cool. Well, you grew up in the 80s.
Yep.
I've got about 10 years on you, but I'm classing us both as 80s kids. You were born in 82, I think.
That's correct.
Towards the end of the decade, I would imagine you're starting to find a real love of certain films, TV shows, stuff like that. What jumps to mind are some like the first things that had a massive impact on you that you still love to this day? Obviously, Star Wars was the big one for me. Early 80s, you couldn't escape it.
I was a bit later, you see. So even though I was born in 82, that's probably when most of you guys and that were watching Star Wars and stuff, late 70s, early 80s. I was a bit later. So my memories are like sitting with my dad on like a Sunday or Saturday afternoon on the couch and just seeing some of his favorite films on VHS, with the old pen written on the side and either the little black bit of plastic broken so it doesn't get taped over. And some of the ones that he would make me watch is really quite strange now when I look back. So one of the most watched films with me and Dad was Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon, which is a hell of a violent film. But maybe he was trying to teach me to like have discipline or to make sure that I don't, give in to bullies or whatever. I don't know, but that's a violent film to watch now.
Do you like his action films?
Yeah, massively. So the nunchucker scene always stayed with me, and he's absolutely obsessed with the Rocky films. And I couldn't tell at that age which one was the first, second, third, or fourth, because you're just kind of enjoying the fact that there's this amazing boxing on TV. And Sylvester Stallone's character was just someone that I idolized because he was always the underdog and he always came out on top. And I was lucky enough when I had my dad's 80th birthday, we surprised him and the family kind of clubbed together. He's never been like out of the UK really, just an odd holiday to like Skegness or something. And we took him to New York for his birthday, and then I surprised him and took him to Philadelphia, and we got to go up the Rocky Steps.
Mate.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the official tour as well. So we got to go to like Adrian's Pet Shop and Mickey's Gym. And when the priest is out the window, like, yo, Rocky, and all this, we were there. Oh, mate, it was mind blowing.
That's superb. I didn't realize they did tours like that. That's very, very cool.
It was awesome. And he had no idea either. So it was a nice big surprise. But then all the usual, if I look at my DVDs and Blu-rays now, I'm stuck in the 80s. I love stuff like Goonies, Gremlins, all those 80s classics. I remember Gremlins was that one that was like up there with Ghostbusters that genuinely scared me as a kid. As much as I want a little Mogwai and like Gizmo, God, if I got one and then fed it after midnight, end up with all these gremlins everywhere. But honestly, mate, the amount of times me and my friends used to play in the fields of Goonies looking for that treasure map and wanting to go and find the treasure and getting those adventures, that was just another world.
Well, I guess all these films would have obviously been and gone at the cinema then. So was it mainly video shops for you, or was it a combination of video shops and cinema trips?
There was a video shop down the local estate. It was called Video Park. And it was like before Blockbuster Video. And I remember going in there with my dad at the weekends and they'd be like, you can choose any film you want. And do you remember those little like triangle out for loan ticket things they put into the sleeves? I'd be walking around like, oh, damn, it's gone. Oh, damn. The first ones I remember that we went home with is stuff like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I remember being allowed to get that out and it wasn't, already pre-booked because these didn't have like 10, 20 copies. They'd be one. And if they didn't have it, you'd have to pick something else. But you weren't just going to go home without anything because your parents had agreed to pay the £1 or whatever it was back then. And I remember, I think it might have been Back to the Future 2 or 3. I remember that one. But the cinema, dude, was like a bit later on. I remember them taking me to a local one in Shrewsbury. And the first early memories was a Back to the Future film. I think it was the third one. So I remember it having a Western theme. When you're a kid, I still can't remember to the day if it's part 2 or part 3, but I remember the train. So it surely was the third one.
Yeah, they did a trailer at the end of part 2, didn't they? So you got a little bit of a taste of it.
They did, because it was already filmed. Yeah, it was already filmed. They don't do that now, do they? It's crazy. It blew my mind. I was so grateful for the cinema and being taken to this place. It was like a Saturday morning kids club thing where your parents would just want to kind of get rid of you for a bit.
Was this like a multiplex one or still an old school single or double?
It was an old school, just single, mate. Probably weren't allowed any suites because you'd be too hyper on the numbers. So I'd just be sitting there watching these films each Saturday. And that's where I saw stuff like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And then I got obsessed with films. So I was like, take me every week.
It's great. I mean, a lot of people say like a lot of classic pop culture films was either like early or mid 80s, stuff we've discussed like Ghostbusters, Goonies and all that kind of thing. But the end of the 80s as well. You see some of those collages of films from like 87, 88 and 89. There's some gold at that time.
Absolute gold. Unbelievable stuff. And with that age, you don't know what makes the film. So you're not sitting there trying to critique it. You're not sitting there going, oh, I wonder how this was directed and who's starring in it. You just enjoyed it for what it was. So I could go and watch stuff like Three Men and a Little Lady, random films, but they were just great. Father of the Bride, these family films, Mrs. Doubtfire, these films were like beautiful family films. You just enjoyed. It didn't matter about trying to worry about what made this film. It was just all about having a nice day out.
When you see like the summer of 89, I think, was it Honey, I Shrunk the Kids 89? Same summer as Batman and all that kind of stuff.
I'm rubbish with years, so anything you quote me with years, I will probably not know.
But sometimes you see these like lineups, like all those films came out in that year or that summer. You can't imagine. Now we get like 1 or 2 blockbusters that come out and they're gone within 3 weeks. Those films defined that year.
I know. And the wait then, because you'd want to watch it again, because you'd be obsessed. So you go and watch a film like Batman Returns and like, oh my God, like I need to see this again. You can't get home and wait for it to come onto Netflix or sit there and hope that, you can go back to the cinema. I think it'd be about a year until it came out. And then you'd go to Woolworths and it'd be like $11.99 on video. So it'd be like 2 weeks pocket money and a paper round to try and get it. And then you wouldn't be like just binge watching it. You would watch that and make sure you've justified that purchase because you're only allowed one album or one video that month, so you've got to make sure it's a good one.
I've said it a million times to people. It's not like Netflix where you just pick a film one night and you're bored. It's not kicked in after 10 minutes. All right, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
You were getting your money's worth. You were watching that film.
We sound like granddads already.
We do.
But it's so true. And an album, my God, if you bought a CD from Virgin Megastore for like 12 quid, that was it. I was going home, listening to every single track in order, listening to it while looking at every bit of the little sort of CD inlay, every lyric, every bit, smelling that paper of a new CD. Like I am making sure that I'm getting this pocket money's worth because even if it's a terrible album, I'm going to love it.
There's two sides to that, let's say, either argument or discussion, because I've seen some memes come up saying, the feeling you got when you spent $14.99 on an album to realise that there was like 2 good songs on it and the rest was shit. There's that side of the argument, but there's also the other side, like what you were just saying then. You played that album over and over again. How many albums would you have missed out on falling in love with if you hadn't have done that? I mean, some of my favourite albums are the ones where I've had to devote the time to it, and after several listens, it suddenly clicks.
Yeah, they're growers, and you need to make sure that they're layered for a reason. Those songs aren't going to be instant hits, and they're the albums now I still listen to. You know, it's great to go back and listen to the singles that made you buy the album, but my God, those sort of, I suppose I'd call them filler back then, but they're not. You know, they're the reasons I now have a better kind of tolerance and appreciation, and it's helped because now I listen to bands like Tool where they test me for 14 minutes per track, you know, so it's like it's set me up for now.
Who are the game changers for you music wise then? Because I know you've had some great music guests on your podcast as well.
So being an 80s kid, it was all cassettes in the late 80s, early 90s. And I remember having a pencil case at primary school. And I claimed that most people say this to try and sound cool, but it's genuine. And if I can find a photo of it, I'll send it you because it's true. I had at primary school a red pencil case and I'd scratched on it with a compass all the Nirvana songs from Nevermind. I was a massive Nirvana fan. And when I started learning guitar and having guitar lessons at primary school, the first song I learned to play was Polly. Really simple 4 chords on acoustic, but I absolutely loved Nirvana. I wasn't that kid who now makes out they loved them when they were a kid. I genuinely did. They changed everything for me. They helped me then get into bands like Guns N' Roses, Metallica, Pearl Jam.
What year would that be then? Because, I mean, Nirvana came around in 90... Well, they exploded in 91, so you'd have still only been 9.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. Just before I took that trip to secondary school, so like 9, 10.
Wow, man, that's really young.
Yeah, I was really grateful. My friend Matt, his sister, we had to go into her room while she was out and take the cassette. I remember having the little naked baby on it, and it was like, oh my God, like, don't get caught with this. And then we'd go into like my home and put a blank cassette in, copy it across while his sister's out, put it back, and then never say anything to anyone. And I'd sit there and listen to that all day, every day. Unbelievable, mate. But game changers growing up, Green Day had a massive, massive impact on me. I was lucky enough to see them at Wolverhampton at the like Wolfram Hall in their real small early days before. Must have been like Dookie.
Is that one of your first gigs then?
Yeah. To see Billy Joe Armstrong on stage, the way they sounded playing stuff like When I Come Around and She and those early songs like Basket Case. I know they played them now in full stadiums, but I knew there was an energy to them. I knew they were going to go far. And that was before I got into new metal. It made me want to pick up a guitar, stick stickers on my guitar and be a little punk with the green hair and rock out.
Did you pursue bands at all? Have you been in bands?
I did. So my early bands, I was in a band called Oracle when I was at school. Play like all Oasis songs, sit there playing like Wonderwall and Don't Look Back in Anger, doing Battle of the Bands. But then we wrote some of our own songs and we supported Travis. I was 15. My parents had to come to basically allow us to do the gig. And on the age of 15, I was on stage supporting Travis and they had just brought out Why Does It Always Rain on Me?
Wow, man.
And that was huge. And they blew up that week. We just saw this thing from this very small band playing this local venue. And we were like, oh, we're allowed to play with them. That'd be good. To them, they literally went off and about 2 years later headlined Glastonbury. It was crazy.
This is really cool. And you've really hit some, being born in 82 and I say getting into like Nirvana, like really early. I mean, I didn't get into bands till, I always loved music, but for music to become really important to me, I was like 15, 16, 17 going on that kind of age. So for you getting into it that early, you've hit some really cool changes in pop culture head on. From
massively.
Like the late 80s films, then the Seattle stuff, then you mentioned like Oasis, new metal. So you've been able to absorb all those elements as you've grown up.
Yeah. You know, when you see those old posters for festivals and you think, God, look at that lineup. That's incredible. I saw one the other day and it was the first festival and my parents must have just been really trusting in me. So they let me go to Ozfest in the UK and I think I was 16. I really think I was 16. And we went on like a little bus from Birmingham and it dropped us off. And when I look at the lineup, I can't believe it. It was Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne, Slayer, Pantera. And I remember being terrified. So I was with my mates. You know, my parents were really strict. Like, here's your pocket money, here's some money. You didn't have mobiles to text or let them know you're okay. You need to be back here. If you're not, you're going to be grounded for months, you know, and find a phone box and let us know you're on your way home.
So where was you traveling from?
Shrewsbury down to, I think it was Milton Keynes Bowl, I think it was.
Right.
And I was sat there, literally wouldn't be having a beer. I'm a kid. I'm sat there probably having whatever it was, a Panda Pop or whatever drink it was in a field first time getting to experience bands like Cold Chamber and these early bands that were in Kerrang. So I remember using all my pocket money to get these magazines. And suddenly this was like really low guitar riffs started playing. It's like, and I'm like, what is going on? And I hadn't done my research at that age because I'm young and I just wanted to see Foo Fighters or Limp Bizkit, whoever it was. And this guitar riff started, and it was the intro to Cowboys from Hell from Pantera. And I was like, oh my God. And all these bikers, and I'm talking absolutely stacked, huge guys, start running towards this main stage. I'm there as like a little spotty faced 15-year-old, green hair.
What t-shirt was you wearing?
I'm sure I'll be wearing a Green Day t-shirt.
Some baggy jeans.
Massive baggy ones that are soaked from the whole ankle all the way up to my knee. And this music started playing. I had a chain on, around keeping my wallet in my back pocket. And this riff kicked in and Phil Anselmo started singing and my ribs were genuinely shaking. I'd never seen or heard anything like it. And I was terrified just because there's this mosh pit and I didn't want to go anywhere near it because I would have genuinely probably got stampered on or just, but something changed for me. And I was like, I've never heard that from these bands I'm listening to. Then obviously Slayer came on and I was like, I wasn't loving it, but I knew that there was something there that I wanted to. At that age, you're not thinking like, oh, I'm going to go out now and buy that album. But something changed for me then. And then I got into like Korn, Limp Bizkit, Deftones and all that Krang era.
Have you followed it on through since? You still fans of all those bands?
Deftones are still one of my favorite bands of all time. I still listen to them now and think they're incredible. I've not kept up to date with bands like Korn. I think, in my opinion, they had their peak back then, but they're still incredible and I've got nothing but respect for them. I was lucky enough to have Head from Korn on the episode and he was amazing. But my music now, my tastes have mellowed out a bit. I think I've appreciated more melodic music and stuff with a bit more depth and more going on. And that doesn't take anything away from these bands because they're phenomenal and they'll be in my heart forever. But I now break down songs and listen for harmonies and different guitar tones.
You still play?
It's depressing, mate. I've got an acoustic guitar that's got a massive thick amount of dust on it and it's just depressing. What I did when I was in a band called Oracle, we broke up because we were all at school and we went off and did college and stuff. But I was then in a band called After. And that for me was my chance to really go out there and be able to have beers and drink and have fun. And we got to play some amazing shows. So at the time, there was a venue in Leicester called The Charlotte. Really great pub. Genuinely, you'd go there and there's bands like Fryson and they've had Muse and bands that are all starting out. And I remember we got a support slot for a band called Nine Black Alps, who were really great. But my favourite band of all time is a band called Reuben.
Did they do an album called Race Car is Race Car spelled backwards or something?
That's it. Race Car is Race Car backwards. Yeah, that's my favourite album ever. They were phenomenal. If I could write an album, that would be the album I'd have done. And we got to support Reuben in Leicester. Got to my dad to come to the gig and help carrying all the amps and stuff. And that felt like I'd achieved everything I'd ever want to achieve.
Done. Tick that box.
Yeah, someone wants to go and play Download. Some people want a world tour. But the moment we got to share the stage with Reuben, I felt like there's nothing else to achieve. Like, it was amazing. And we got to record with the guy that did one of the Biffy Clyro albums and stuff. But that was enough. Like, I felt like I can hang up my guitar with pride.
So you're getting big into music, film and all this kind of stuff. Was like music journalism or journalism of any kind, was that ever on your radar? Like going to college or university or anything like that?
Never. I went to university and studied music technology as a degree. And I only did that because I wanted to basically get an excuse to not have to get a job. So I went there and was like, oh, if I can play guitar and learn how to record guitars and drums and vocals and stuff, be an engineer on a desk, that would be enough for me. Like, that would be great. So went there for 3 years and genuinely just partied with my mates, got to go to gigs, learn how to iron clothes, do all these stuff for university.
What university was it?
De Montfort in Leicester. So I went there, made some really great friends who I still speak to now. Never thought of doing anything to do with journalism or interviewing or anything because I just hadn't ever thought about it as being a job. And podcasts weren't a thing then. This is 20 years ago, that is unheard of. So I think I just dreamed of being successful in a band and just hopefully being able to record people's albums for them and be an engineer. But that's such a hard world to get into. And you've got to be so good to make it as a career. So I kind of binned it off and just had fun.
So did you ever do any like movie reviews or music reviews for magazines or fanzines or anything?
Nothing until we launched Skip to the End.
Wow.
Yeah, never, which is weird now because I look back, I'm like, God, there was a lot of time I could have done stuff, especially when you think of all the great magazines that would publish stuff then, like Enemy, Melody Maker, Kerrang, all these cool little independents. But no, I never even had the idea cross my mind.
I want to talk a little bit about Skip to the End, which was like your first foray into podcasting. Was that kind of like a happy accident? Just friends?
Yeah, massively.
Being movie fans?
Obviously, fast forward now about 10 more years. And I used to just love going to the cinema as an adult, just really stripping down films and going for a beer afterwards. So me and my best friend at the time, who I was working with in a recruitment job, we would go with another friend of ours called Adam, and we would just sit there and go and watch a film as a hobby. Afterwards, do you fancy going to get a bite to eat or going to get a pint? And we'd just sit there and be like, oh, what did you think of this? What do you think of the acting? What do you think of the score, the directing?
So you're going deep into it.
We were, but still friendly banter and just, did you think it's his best work? Did you think there could have been better? You know, all this sort of stuff. I think I just remember us having that conversation. Like, we should have recorded tonight's conversation. Like, I bet someone sitting in a table next to us would have really enjoyed this because we were just bouncing off each other and loving film. So we tried it and we went to my friend Ben's house, huge fans of TV series Spaced. So we came up with the name Skip to the End, which is, you know, the big famous line from Simon Pegg's character. And we said, let's just do a podcast on sport, movies, TV, what's going on in the news, and all these topics. And it was like, this is ridiculous. Like, it's going to be like a 7-hour show.
Throw everything in there.
What audience are we going after here? Because I think there's nobody left off. We went crazy.
You threw wrestling in there as well, didn't you?
Wrestling, that was it. True, yeah. God, it was all in there. And we realized we had to be real about this. So it had to be just films. So let's just go and watch a film, come back and review it. And then, do you know what? While we're at it, let's do a topic of a top 3, revisit an old classic. And that was a nice little format we thought would work. We did it on a phone, an iPhone on the middle of the table, sat round and just did it. And it was okay. And because I'd learned a little bit of editing at university, I said, look, I'll get Audacity, put it in there and have a play and just keep it simple, put a bit of music at the start and a bit at the end. But I found that I was really anal about it and was getting rid of all the ums and the ahs and making sure the volumes were good. And I was like, oh God, I've gotten a bit of obsession here. So Ben's like, let's just stick it out there, real basic piece of artwork and just see what happens. And I know it's weird now that we're talking about it today on a podcast where there's thousands of podcasts out there. But at this time, and I'm talking might be 8 years ago, it wasn't a huge thing to have a podcast. It really has been over the last 5 years that everyone in the world's got one. So we put it out there. And in the first week, I remember just looking at the stats and it was like, 300, 700, 900, 1400. I think by the end of the week, it hit like 5,000.
Holy shit.
There wasn't Twitter that we were using, Facebook. There wasn't Instagram as much. And it just took off. I have no idea what it was that stood us apart from others, but people just liked it. So we said, let's do another one. And then we're like, should we try and do it every other week? And that seems realistic. And it's just an excuse for us to have a beer, go and see the films we're doing anyway. And then it got to be like, let's throw a game show in. Let's try and get some prizes. Let's do features like movie masturbate and game shows. And then it just, honestly, it sounds crazy, but 5 years went like that. And it was just the momentum built up. And each week it's gone to 9,000 and 26,000. And oh my God, 100,000 people listen this week.
That's crazy. All just natural momentum.
Organic. It was beautiful. We had a few things where we got invited to attend Comic-Cons. So we went to MCM Comic-Con. We get photographed and have a little tiny soundbite with people like Walt Jr. from Breaking Bad and people like that. And it was only a short little 5-minute interview and then splice it into the episode as the end a little bit. And those people would retweet it. So I found that people like Walt Jr.'s numbers were huge and Breaking Bad was on series 5. And we had Gillian Anderson on from obviously X-Files and stuff. And they were sharing it. And then I noticed that this Twitter was going up and we suddenly had 10,000 followers and you couldn't really keep track. It just blew up.
What was your reference point from other podcasts? Was you a fan of podcasts?
The only podcast I listened to was Kevin Smith's podcast, the Smodcast.
He was one of the first people for me, which kind of put podcasts on the radar.
I think he was one of the first major podcasts.
And he started like doing all these little offshoot ones, which I know he's still got like this podcast empire.
He had loads, didn't he? Like Fat Man on Batman and all this, and that literally loads. And then he was doing live shows at the Smodcast and it all grew. But he was the only podcast I listened to. And it honestly wasn't popular to have a podcast. It was just this thing. And some people are like, how did Skip to the End do so well? It was all about timing. If we launched today, it would never be as successful. It'd get lost amongst all the other millions on Spotify. And we just hit it at the right time. We got the right people and it just built this whole community.
Do you think that amount of success it got so early on, did that affect how you approach the show? Would you have still gone in the same route if it was still getting 50, 100 downloads, or did that just spare you on?
I think we'd have lost interest. I think Ben wouldn't be upset if I said this. I think we'd have just been like, we're bored now, let's do something different.
Feel a bit of responsibility to people?
You have a demand, yeah. You kind of, the listeners for Skip to the End, we called the Skip Fam, and they're a community that are on Twitter still to this day, stronger than ever. And they're the most beautiful individuals you'll ever meet, and really kind, and they all click and get on really well. And their shared interest was Skip to the End. So each Saturday you get people going like 1 hour till the new episode, and
wow,
then they'd be digesting it and feeding in their input. So if that week we were doing our top 3 actors, we'd ask everybody to jump on board, and you'd see these amazing groups of people commenting and building relationships online. And it became this really great, strong community. And then Twitter got to like 60,000 people.
I love it.
The downloads were, just before we called it a day, was I think just over 13 million. Just at its peak, it was phenomenal.
Got to ask you what's frustrating about it, because you're getting that kind of success, and I think a lot of people go into podcasts, this is my future, I'm going to make a living from doing this. Was there any like frustrating things like, we've got all this momentum and stuff, but did you feel in a bubble at all? Did you feel like a glass ceiling on it?
I feel like we needed all 3 of us to want to take it to the next stage. So we had a member change a few years in. Adam, who's a close friend, left, and we had a guest that kept coming on called Gemma. She joined, and I changed the dynamic, and it wasn't just a sausage fest with 3 guys talking each week. I think she really helped, really kind of change the dynamic, had a new appeal, more people would jump on board. It was great to hear a female talking about movies on the same, and it was this respect, and it was like unheard of that there was just a mix. It was either all girl podcasts or all guys, and we had this nice mix. And I think all of us wanted to be successful. All of us would love to dream to like hand in our notices at our jobs. But the real world is not like that. Film 4 voted us the top podcast of the year one year. And we had been on the red carpet to film premieres. We went down to London.
Did you get invited to a WWE event?
Yeah, me and Ben got sent to SummerSlam in America.
As you do.
As you do. Even though we're a movies podcast, we got to go to Brooklyn and watch SummerSlam live and all this stuff, and going to download. And it was absolutely huge. And I think we were in touching distance of either agreeing to maybe a sponsorship, but then you're going to be going down that horrible journey of welcome to Skip to the End, sponsored by Coca-Cola, your number one tasting drink. And I puts me off, when I listen to Chris Jericho's podcast and other wrestlers, and it's full of adverts, I'm constantly hitting that fast forward button now. It's frustrating. And I didn't want us to do that. And it's a risk. Some of us are getting married or going into careers, and to throw it all away and just focus purely on a podcast and hope that people invest money or to start charging, I think may have taken the love and passion out of it. The fact we didn't have it as our main source of income, the fact it was a release from our day jobs that we've been suffering in all day, and another day in the office, but don't worry, tonight we get to record. I think that's what made it what it was, and people could relate to that and be like, look, these guys are just having fun. The moment you start having to plug t-shirts and merch, I think it would have lost its appeal. So it wasn't my choice to end the podcast. Ben sprung it on me one day and said, look, I think it's time. And I was like, oh God, it felt like being dumped. It's like, oh my God, like this is the biggest change ever. But looking back, it was the best time ever for us to go, because I sometimes compare it to stuff like TV series and stuff like that. And I'm a huge fan of British Office with Ricky Gervais. Series 1 and 2 for me are gold. I think there's 6 episodes of each. And it's the most perfect TV show. It wraps up beautifully, and people were left wanting more. So you always see people now saying, I wish he'd come back. I know he did a David Brent film, but I don't count that. And because he left people wanting more and went out when everyone was talking about it, it's not a bad way to go. If we'd start releasing stuff that was half-hearted, we couldn't be bothered. And it's very transparent when listening to people. If we were like, let's just try and get through today, we'll be all right. I truly believe people would have heard that and gone, and then the numbers would have dropped off. We would be like Kiss, still playing shows. People saying to us, is this your last time? And then, we're back again. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted to go out as the best we could be. And I truly believe the last 6 months of Skip to the End as the editor and listening to it and producing it was the best work we ever did.
How great's that? Right, that's it. Like you say, you did an Office, you did a Ricky Gervais, you did a Fawlty Towers.
Yes. It's good. It's like a legacy now. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way, because I'll never say that, we were an incredible podcast, but it felt like we had succeeded and done something really special. And now and then we come back once every 6 months for a little special. Chemistry's still there. it gives people that reminder that, we're still out there, but trying to do that podcast as well as being married or having a full-time job and everything else, it was too much.
So that was 2019, but a few years prior to that, you'd already started your own show, Mark and Me.
Yes.
The title, which is a twist on the name of, I guess, the cult classic.
The absolute masterpiece
film,
classic, yes.
Mac and Me, that masterpiece.
Yeah.
1988. Did the show introduce you to that, or did you see it in a video shop back in the day?
I wish I had. We had this round on Skip to the End where me, Ben and Gemma would choose a rewatch. So each week we'd have to go back and revisit a classic, and you could bring stuff to the table. And I remember there was a phase where we were watching, like, I can't remember some of the films, but like The Room, the Tommy Wiseau film, Troll 2, these cult, terrible films that are supposed to be good, Battlefield Earth, The Wicker Man remake, all these ones. And I think it was me, and I picked it knowing that it was in this category of just terrible films. And I loved it. I just loved how bad it was. It was ridiculous. It was product placement all the way through. It was just on a level of just so bad it's good.
Did it just show up in a search?
I think it did. I think I put like top 10 worst films ever made. And then we watched it and Ben and Gemma ripped it to pieces, rightfully so. But I was like, no, I'm going to fight for this. And I love it. And it's an amazing film.
I love that you fell in love with it. Like, I wish I'd seen it back in the day.
I know.
I caught Nirvana, but I missed Mac.
I know.
Shit.
I regret it. But that was then just a silly reason to call the podcast Mark and Me. And it was just a play on words. And then as time went on, people now understand that it's the guest and me, and we ask you to come and join us and sit with us. And
it's genius.
Yeah, it does. It works really well.
Who did your artwork for? Because it's great. I love the colours and everything. I've always been a fan of
this one was from my friend Paul, who had a company called Headshot Clothing at the time, but he just did like a really iconic little purple and yellow alien, and it just works with a little Walkman, and it just sums up everything. I honestly, I love it. It's just perfect.
Have you ever tracked down anyone from the show?
Yeah, I've had the director on twice.
I didn't get everything.
I know. And he talked all about a sequel idea and behind the scenes and the actors. I will get more on. It's just that it's a project that would just, I'd love to get Paul Rudd on and spend an hour and a half talking about why we love Mac and Me. You
came out of the gate on fire, really. Some of your first guests were like massive hitters. Kevin Smith, Corey Feldman, Anthony Hopkins, Sherilyn Fenn, which I'm very jealous about. What was the initial response to the show? Did a lot of Skip to the End listeners get on board with you?
Yeah, I think we were starting to introduce a few guests on Skip to the End. So we had, like I said, Gillian Anderson, and it didn't work with the format of Skip to the End. So it crossed over. It didn't happen that Skip to the End broke up and then I started a new podcast. They ran alongside each other.
Was that a lot of work for you?
God, mate, it was ridiculous. Most nights I'd be up till 2 a.m. because editing me, Ben and Gemma, 3 separate audio files, getting all the levels right. People always used to comment, oh, your production's incredible. Oh, it sounds flawless. But it took me 12, 15 hours for an episode every other week. That's not a bad mindset to have because you then become really particular and then make it polished. You're proud of it. So you put all your blood and sweat into it. But then you realize that everything else in the outer world is falling to pieces. Spent far too long on audio. But I basically 6 years ago today said to myself, I'm going to go down to London and I'm going to meet Kevin Smith and I'm going to interview him. And there was no press team. There was nothing. He was just showing a film at the Prince Charles Cinema. I got on the train. I remember putting a tweet out and people were like, good luck. I thought, this is crazy. It's like telling people you're going to do your driving test. Everyone then knows so that people are rooting for you. I should have just been quiet, but I thought, no, I'm going to tell people. And then people had texted me like, how's it going? I'm like, oh, he's just come on stage now. And as he had finished his introduction for showing his new film at the time, Yoga Hosers, he walked down the center of the cinema, down the aisle, through the double doors. Now, I need to word this right so I don't sound like a lunatic fan or crazy, but I just followed him out and it was genuine. Like he held the door for me like I was going to the toilet. And I said, hey, Kevin, I'm a massive fan, but I also didn't want to be too much of a fanboy. So I didn't want to be, I need to try and get the right balance. And I said, hi, Kevin, I'm a big fan of your podcast and all your work. And I was hoping that I could just get some time with you today while you're here to just do a 5-minute interview, and showed him my phone. It would mean a lot to me. And he went, oh, I'm about to go for some food with my daughter. We're here. And I said, you once said from Wayne Gretzky, it's not about the goals you score. It's about the shots that you want to take. And that's my shot right now. And I'm standing here trying to take my shot. And he went, do you know what? I'll come back from my meal, meet me back here at midnight. And yeah, we'll do something. So I walked back into the cinema, the film's starting, and I'm like, oh my God, I'd not prepped any questions. I never thought this would happen, but the gods have made it happen that moment. So I'm trying to focus on this film, but really thinking to myself, he's back in 20 minutes. Oh my God. So it got to whatever time we'd said, maybe midnight. And there he was in reception. And I was like, no way, with his daughter. And he went, right, shoot. And I was like, oh my God. So I hit record on my phone and I was like, so Kevin, tell me about your top 5 films of all time. Nervous as hell, shaking with my phone, wasn't prepared. And he was cool. And he was just, talking like I listened to him on all of his Q&As.
The best person to be almost unprepared. As long as you've got something, just a little nugget to tease him
Anything.
with. He'll just go with it.
He'll run with it. It's the best. Yeah, I couldn't ask for any more. And I think I asked him one question and it lasted 10 minutes. And he was great. And he could see that I was passionate. And I said, thanks very much. I think I asked 3 or 4 questions and I had it on my phone. And that was my golden ticket then. I thought, right, this is either the most stupid thing I'm ever going to do with launching with my absolute idol, the reason I started podcasting, I'm setting the bar higher than I'd ever done. What the hell am I doing? Or it's incredible because you get a buy-in straight away. People are going to take me seriously. People are going to go, right. And it's probably the best decision I made because yes, it also opened the doors and people then like, if I went after Corey Feldman, who you interviewed recently, I'm like, well, Kevin Smith. So you get credibility and people are like, okay, well, this guy's serious. Little did they know I was only on 2 episodes at that point. I could quote skip to the end numbers and all this sort of stuff.
Mate, I love that story. It's friggin'...
I've not told that to many people.
That's superb, man. And you say that's 6 years to the day?
Today, yeah. There you go.
Oh, superb. Did you get any feedback from Kevin at the time? Because I know he's very active on Twitter. And
he liked it, I think. He liked the tweet. And that was enough for me.
Yeah.
Being a huge fan, I'm like, wow, well, he's seen it. I didn't really grasp the concept of how powerful a retweet could be. So I wasn't thinking to myself about the numbers. I was just going out there to try and interview some of my favorite people. So then I went to Corey Feldman and I think I either DM'd him or something. I don't want to give all my secrets away here because then everyone's going to be like...
That's the weird thing. You never know how you're going to get a guest. It's people ask me like, how'd you get all these guests? And I'll say, well, it's weird sometimes. Sometimes the bigger the guests are the easiest ones. Sometimes you'll sometimes just message through the contact page on the website, which that's a no-brainer, really.
Yeah.
And yeah, fine.
They come back to you, yeah.
Then others, you like going around the houses to try and get them. It's weird. I think it's timing, isn't it, a lot of times? Like the Kevin Smith thing.
Yeah. I've been lucky with that and also very resilient. And I think I bounce back. So if someone says no, I'm like, okay, well, it's not no, it's just not now.
I'm friends with a lot of podcasters now and they'll say, oh, you got such and such on your show. I've been trying to get them for 6 months and it never worked. And I think it's timing a lot of the time.
And 6 months is not a long time. We've spoke, I think, off air before this about Sherilyn Fenn.
Mm-hmm.
I got stood up with that interview over 10 times, but it's about, right, okay, so do I want to do this interview? Yes, I do. Does this person mean a lot to me? Yes. Do you love Twin Peaks? Yes. So let's...
They said they'll reschedule, so let's just keep going.
And then eventually it happened. I think some people would have given up after the 3rd or 4th time, and I get that, but I was never going to give up. So... there's not many that have got away, I don't think. And that's a good way to be.
Who's surprised you off the top of your head? Over 200 episodes. Who's been like some favourite guests or who's surprised you? Like, wow, I wasn't expecting things to go that way.
Sometimes I think I'm not prepared for just how open and honest they are because you go to like a press junket or you get, you listen to other people's podcasts that are out there and they're quite robotic and their answers are very, yes, I really enjoyed the release of that film. It's out now on DVD. And I'm like, okay, so because I don't always approach about promoting or getting a cheap headline, which I think is the worst, I just want to have a chat like me and you are today. Really relaxed, really fun, and just knowing that they've probably got to do this all day. So if I could make it a bit more memorable for them and have a bit of a laugh, it's a win-win. And I think when I had, Joey Kramer from Flight the Navigator, the first time I had him on, he had been in prison and had armed robbery against him and been addicted to drugs. And I think I wasn't expecting to talk about that.
I gotta say, was that a tough one to go into? It's like, do I bring this up? Which way do I go with it?
I think I went into it like I do with everybody of just, let's see how it goes. I didn't have a motive of like, I'm going to get him to admit that he was guilty of a crime. I'm not the Sun newspaper, the opposite. I just want to make someone feel good and have a nice time. And I sat and chatted to him and it just felt like me and you today, like I'd known him for years, just really easy. And we started talking about it and it just came naturally into the conversation about, oh, well, during that time, obviously I was in prison and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, do I prod here or do I let him talk? And I felt just let him talk. And he really opened up and talked all about missing out on some of his stuff with his newborn daughter through prison, how she's now the main reason to come back. how he doesn't want to get back into drugs and how he avoids going down the same paths and avoid making the same mistakes. And as a podcaster, that's gold because it's a very good conversation. I've never used any of my podcasts to get headlines or to promote anything. I've just done it because I want that guest. And it just felt he trusted me enough to talk about it. And I respected that. So he then came back for a second part. And then last month, me and him spent the day in Liverpool face to face on the Beatles tour.
Dude.
Having a day out. And then he took me for drinks and food at the Cavern Club. And he's now a friend. Genuine friend. We're going to see Pearl Jam next weekend together. Like, he's genuinely a friend. And you just think to yourself, what a crazy world we live in when I used to rent Flight the Navigator from Blockbuster Video. And now genuinely he's my friend. It's not like, oh yeah, he's your friend. He texts me all the time, you know.
Mate, I love that. What would you have been when you saw Flight of the Navigator? 7, 8 years old?
I'm just going to look at the maths. Yeah, I think so.
Hey, Mark, David Freeman's going to be a pal.
It's too much to kind of digest, my friend. I think I have to he's just a normal person, a really great guy, and just what you'd expect from someone that you know, they say never meet your heroes. He was my hero, and now he's a genuinely good friend. And I just don't see him as the guy from the film now. He's just my mate Joey, you know? I'm
going to leave it at that because that's a good way to end. Mate, well, congratulations on the success of the show. It's great just to see it keep growing.
It is. And I think I've said to you earlier, I feel like it's only now that I've really started to truly invest in it and believe in it. And that's not that I haven't invested time, I have, but I've fallen in love with it now. I've really appreciated what I've done, but now it really feels on another level, and the momentum's there, the drive's there, the passion's there, and I really feel like I'm just starting now.
I mean, I follow you on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. There's times when you struggle with things, keeping the podcast going, and like from financial point of views and all that kind of stuff. So it's great to see you like break through that wall to where you are now.
It's tough. My dream is to do it full time. There's not many people out there that are full-time podcasters. You know, your Joe Rogans, they're absolutely filthy rich because they're talking and they've got the right product to sell, and it's fine. I'm an independent podcaster, and I think people forget that I'm a one-man team. No producer, no editor, no one scheduling my interviews. You'll know this. It's me on my own doing everything. And at the moment, it's, you know, I would love to do it full time, because if I'm doing this all while doing a 40-hour job and sustaining a house and all the usual stuff, I think to myself, if someone gave me this as a 9 till 5 every day, just think how far it could go. But people don't want to pay for podcasts. So I just don't know what to do.
Mate, I'd say the consistency, just keep chipping away. And the fact that you're just more passionate about it now. I mean, you've been doing it in a couple of years. It's going to be 10 years since you started podcasting.
God, that's scary, isn't it? That's really crazy. But it's true, yeah. Mad.
That goes to show, like, there's no instant win with it. You had that initial success with Skip to the End where it blew up, but now you're still here almost 10 years down the line. God,
it makes me feel old, man. It's like, are we going to be here in 10 more years going?
Well, no, you should be proud of that. Like you say, when you started, you had your Kevin Smiths and all that kind of stuff. But other than that, yeah, just keep firing forward, dude.
And you, dude. And it's amazing to be on the other end of the questions.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it has. And it's I feel genuinely like I could sit with you in a beer and talk for 10 hours. So I wouldn't make you edit that.
We'll have to meet up at some point.
100%. Absolutely. I really enjoyed today. It felt like we were just getting into it. I'm like, you know, so if you ever want to do more or whatever, let's do it.
Superb, man. All right. You enjoy the rest of your day, Mark.
I will do. Speak to you soon. Take care, buddy.
Big thanks to Mark Woodyatt of the Mark and Me podcast for just being a top bloke and giving us a wonderful insight into his experiences of podcasting right here on the Straight to Video podcast. Really enjoyed that talk, and hopefully for you enjoyed hearing two like-minded people hooking up and having a great chat. Please be sure to like, follow and subscribe to Mark and Me wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can dive into over 200 episodes of his show, which are sure to keep you busy if you're all caught up on this one. Before we go, I want to shout to all the wonderful people who continue to support the Straight to Video Patreon page, and to say hello and thanks to our latest patron, Dean Holt, for getting on board to make this show happen. Dean runs his own Instagram movie page at TheMovieGuy76, so if you're on Instagram, please check him out. And if you too would like to help support this show, then you can find all the cool rewards over at patreon.com/STVpod, and I really appreciate you doing so. For now, though, that is it for today's show. I'll be heading over to the 80s video shop probably as you're hearing this, as we get things set to open on the 23rd of July. But in the meantime, thanks for listening, and let's do it all again soon.